A chair can really be an effective tool for improving your posture. Just like a ruler, it has a number of uses that can help us understand and work to improve problems with our posture. Simply by standing in front of a chair, it can become quite clear that you are leaning. If the backs of your knees are not touching the chair, this is because your torso and legs are leaned forward. Today, we're going to look at how to straighten the leg and the torso in a rational way. First, let's look at two solutions to this problem that will not help us. We do not want to move our feet back under the chair in order to get the back of the legs to touch the chair. This will do nothing to help us straighten the leg. This is something to remember because we are all problem solvers. We want to be right. So if we are presented with an issue like this, we will often seek to immediately find a solution. Even if we know we don't want to move the feet back, we can subconsciously try to cheat this in order to just fix the problem. But obviously, this cheat doesn't fix the problem. The second solution that will not work is to pull the knee backwards. While this seems like a good idea on its face, we must recall the problem we've looked at several times in this series. People habitually go onto the outsides of their feet. They rotate the outer malleolus backwards, angling the ankle outward. And they also pull the outside of the inferior part of their knee outwards and backwards. This is why, though narrowing the heels brings the insides of the lower legs closer together, it also leads to the outsides of the lower legs being overly widened. If you give yourself the direction to pull the knee back, there is every chance that you will pull the outside of the lower knee back and out, because that is what is habitual for you. Doing that will tend to throw you on the outside of the foot, and in most cases, it will cause a rotation at the pelvis that is the opposite of what is needed for lengthening. Here, we can answer a question we asked a couple episodes ago. What happens to the inside of the upper leg when you go on the outside of the foot? As the lower leg collapses outward and backward, the upper leg collapses inward and forward, and you end up with bent, twisted legs. The direction we will use to counter this is to pull the head of the fibula forward and in. You can feel the bump of the head of the fibula on the outside of the leg, just below the kneecap. But we don't want to narrow the legs, so we will add the direction to pull the inside of the upper leg out and back. We can apply this direction from as low as the internal condyle, which you can find on the upper part of the inside of the knee. You can feel the bump of the bone there. And you can go as high as the lesser trochanter with this outward and backward movement. You can't feel the lesser trochanter, but what this means is that we want to rotate the entire femur, so you can apply this direction to the upper leg all the way up to the buttocks. Orchestrating these two movements at the same time will be difficult if this is your first look at such adjustments. I know the first time I tried this, it seemed almost impossible. When I brought the head of the fibula forward, my legs narrowed, and when I pulled the inside of the upper leg out and back, the head of the fibula went out. But give it a try. We're trying to wake up some slumbering muscles and fascia. A good way to start working with this is to help these movements with your hands while sitting or bending down while standing. Put the fingers of one hand on the head of the fibula and place the palm behind the calf. Put your other hand on the inside of the upper knee, with the thumb on top and the fingers below. Push the head of the fibula and the calf forward and in. Push the upper knee backwards and out. Another way to think about this movement is that you are moving both the fingers and thumbs outward while making sure to move the fingers outwards faster. This will get the outwards and backwards rotation going. In order to straighten our leg and bring it back towards the chair, we can look at this quote from F.M. Alexander to give us a hint at the path. We already saw the beginning of this quote, but let's see how it continues. The primary principle involved in attaining a correct standing position is the placing of the feet in that position which will ensure their greatest effect as base, pivot, and fulcrum, and thereby throw the limbs and trunk into that pose in which they may be correctly influenced and aided by the force of gravity. The weight of the body, it should be noted, rests chiefly upon the rear foot, and the hips should be allowed to go back as far as is possible without altering the balance affected by the position of the feet, and without deliberately throwing the body forward. This movement starts at the ankle and affects particularly the joints of the ankles and the hips. Our leg pivots around our foot at the talus bone. we will remember looking at the joint of the ankle. The tibia rotates backwards and forwards directly over the talus. So as Alexander says, in order to move our legs and torso backwards in space, we will need to make a movement that starts at the ankle. We need to pivot around the talus to bring the leg and torso backwards in space to meet the chair. There are several pitfalls we must avoid during a procedure like this. The first obvious one is that we still want to use the direction to pull the head of the fibula forward and in. We can't allow ourselves to pull the lower outside part of the knee back and out, or we will end up on the outsides of our feet. The next problem is that most people will pull their sit bones and lower sacrum back even faster than they pull their leg back, as that is habitual for them. This will force the sternum down, and though the leg will straighten, the torso will not. To counter this problem, we can try another procedure. Place one of your hands onto the front of your opposite thigh. You will be pushing your thigh back with this hand. Your other hand can go on your buttock. Try to get a finger against the sit bone and the wrist on the sacrum. You will be pushing forward with this hand to prevent the wrong rotation of the pelvis. These opposing forces can lead to lengthening of both the leg and the torso. Help this along by adding the direction to pull the iliacs back and up away from the side of the knee. The final major pitfall that I will mention is that you don't want your upper torso to go back during this procedure. This is more advanced, so if you're just starting out, don't worry too much about this to begin with. It's something you can come back to, because the other considerations will be plenty difficult for beginners. But when you bring your leg and mid-torso backwards in space, you need some forward movement to maintain your balance. The first forward movement was the sit bones and lower sacrum forward. The second forward movement is to bring the upper sternum, shoulders, and elbows forward. As we saw in the series about the torso, most people are habitually pulling their upper torso back. Even though people are leaning forward with their torso as a whole, the top end is pulled back to compensate. So when we bring the whole torso backwards in space, we need to start unbending the upper torso and bringing it forward. If we don't, the upper torso will be way too far back, and you will be out of balance. You will fall backwards. Or more realistically, since most people won't allow themselves to fall backwards, you will fall back into habit and press your mid-torso, iliacs, and legs forward not to fall. Experiment with these ideas and see if you can't do as Alexander says and bring the weight of your torso onto the back of your foot. Test to see if you have by lifting the front of your feet off the floor and standing on your heels. That will be an exercise in balance. In the next episode, we will return to studying the foot. On the inside of the foot, there is an arch, which might be more accurately described as a truss. Here's a question that might sound easy. Do we want this arch on the inside of the foot to be high, low, or somewhere in the middle? And why? As always, I will ask you to give it some thought, and then join me next episode for another exciting journey into the foot.